Welcome back. My name is Arya and I don't waste your time, so let's get straight into it. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's video, we're probably going to be talking about one of the most complicated businesses that I see get thrown around. That is, of course, going to be Salesforce, ticker symbol CRM. This is a business that I have roughly a 32% stake in, and the problem that many investors face with this business in particular is the simple fact that it is extremely complicated to know what it is that they're actually doing. What is the value they're providing? I hear constantly that, they have high switching costs within their business. Once you start using Salesforce, you can't switch off of it very easily. But what makes it so special? What makes it difficult to switch off? Those are all the various different things that I will hopefully try to tackle in this video to maybe try to shed some light on the incredible business that lies right in front of us that actually trades at a very reasonable valuation today ahead of the earnings on August 28th. So without wasting any time, we should probably dive into what it is that Salesforce actually does. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend like I know the ins and outs of it, but instead, I wanted to watch a video together by David Liu. And this is a Salesforce developer. And he, at the time of this recording, roughly 4 years ago, he had been building on Salesforce for 12 years, as he mentions in the video over here. So I wanted to kind of start off with this. And he does a very good job explaining the various capabilities of Salesforce. So let's see what he has to say. And by the way, the clip is slightly sped up just so we save a little bit of time here.
Picture this. You're sitting around minding your own business and boom, pop out of nowhere. And I'm bruised and I'm battered. And I come to you with this dire message. The world as we know it ends in 5 years. A critical security bug is found in Microsoft Excel, and the vast majority of the planet simply ignores the software update. Global computer systems crash, the economy crashes, and I, one of the last remaining survivors on the planet, have traveled back in time to give you this one task to save all of humanity. I need you to build the next generation of spreadsheets. I'm putting you on an island with 10,000 of the best engineers on the planet. You need to take Microsoft Excel, rebuild it from the ground up, and when I return in 5 years, we're going to save the planet together. You know what you would have built at the end of those 5 years? You would have built Salesforce, except you don't need to. Because 20 years ago, I already traveled back in time to give that exact message to Mark Benioff. And in 1999, he founded Salesforce.com. Today, Salesforce is one of the most dominant softwares on the planet, yet the vast majority of people have never heard of it. So what is Salesforce? Salesforce is the next generation of spreadsheets. All right, David, well, what's wrong with spreadsheets? I'm glad you asked. Let me show you. Here's the spreadsheet I'm using to track how much money I've wasted setting up this YouTube channel to get my 87 subscribers. Now, my wife gave me a very generous budget of $2,000 to buy whatever I needed for YouTube. But as of today, I've spent quite a bit more than that, and my wife has no idea about this. I really need to hide this price column from my wife. It's essential for my survival. But I can't. If I hide it or delete it from her, I gotta hide it from everyone else too. All right, I got another idea. Maybe I should let her see the price column, but I really don't want her to see some of my more expensive purchases. You know, I only spent $50 on her birthday present this year. So if she sees that I spent $220 on a desk lamp, then we're gonna have a lot bigger problems than the world ending. Side note, this desk lamp is fantastic and I highly recommend it. And I'm gonna have a link to it in the description below. Anyway, back to business. I can't hide these purchases from my wife in the spreadsheet either, because if I do, then I can't see them. All right, David, keep your cool, don't panic. What if I come clean with my wife? I'll tell her I've spent over $6,500 on gear for my YouTube channel, and I promise I won't spend another cent. In fact, I'll set up an alert on the spreadsheet where if I add another purchase to it, it'll automatically email you with all the details so you can stop me right away. Wait, no. You can't really set up automated emails in Excel. Okay, I have a new idea, and this one's a good one. I'm gonna start a GoFundMe where people can donate to my YouTube channel. I'll give everyone access to the spreadsheet so I can be completely transparent with how I'm spending their money. And I'll even let people update the spreadsheet and give me some suggestions on things to buy. Well, shoot, actually that won't work either. Spreadsheets just slow down and break when you have a lot of people using it. All right, well, I'm out of ideas. My wife's gonna kill me. It's been a fun ride, YouTube.
I'm going to pause that right here very quickly. So he just highlighted some of the issues that goes on with spreadsheets and Microsoft Excel in general. It doesn't, like, there's only one view of the Excel sheet. Like, you could list items. There's like boxes and whatnot that you could put information into, but that's about it. And it's only everybody sees the same version of that spreadsheet when you send it. So for example, in his case, if you wanted to hide anything, or if you wanted certain items or certain lines not to be shown to certain people, that doesn't work like that. And additionally, once you start adding a bunch of different people into the spreadsheet, it starts to slow down and things start to break. So what's the solution to this?
And you know, for the record, I accept no fault or responsibility over this. Really, it's the spreadsheet's fault. It fundamentally does not have the features I need to hide my spending from my wife. Wait, what if I use Salesforce? Of course, it's the next generation of spreadsheets. I can't believe I didn't think of that. And I've been doing Salesforce for 10 years now. Okay, so here's my YouTube spending spreadsheet now in Salesforce. This is what Salesforce looks like out of the box. Salesforce actually runs on the web in the cloud, so there's nothing to download. You just access it from your web browser. So Salesforce has tabs just like spreadsheets do. The rows and columns in these tabs are just like the rows and columns in my spreadsheet. You can also sort, filter, and search to your heart's content. But Salesforce takes things a step further by formalizing each row to be a record, a single connected unit, tying all the information of that row in one place. You know, this seems like such a simple thing, but fundamentally it's the difference between Salesforce and Excel. In Excel, you just have a bunch of random data thrown together on a grid. In Salesforce, things are very cleanly organized into records, and I can click on the record to drill down into it, and a record has structure.
So again, I just want to very quickly show this as well. Like on screen, we could see he's listed it in that like main dashboard thing that you just saw with all the various different items and whatnot. But additionally, once you click into all these different items, you'll see that they have like a history of like who updated it, what the price was, the purchase date, all that type of stuff. You see like last modified by, down to the date, down to the hour. And then additionally, there's it seems there's like a kind of like a comments feed over here on the side. It says David's wife asks, "Is that a lamp?" Right? Very angrily and whatnot. So it's like internal communication within the company. Your mind probably starts to think about, oh, this would be very interesting for like, let's just say you're like a car company, right? And you have to input that you guys bought certain gear to manufacture the cars and whatnot, right? Like you could start putting, okay, this category of like batteries and whatnot, or what the name of the item that you bought is and all that type of stuff. And all of a sudden, like there's a lot more detail that goes specifically into all the various different items that are listed in quote unquote, like the spreadsheet, in this case, the big list for Salesforce, right?
In the category field, I can only choose from pick list value. In the price column, I can only enter a number. You know, in Excel, you can enter whatever you want in any column and break your spreadsheet sideways, but not in Salesforce. Price has to be a number. And the beauty of this structure, since Salesforce knows price will always be a number, Salesforce can do some magic, like automatically converting your prices from US dollars to euros or pesos or rupees, depending on who's looking at it. And the record has metadata too. There's a unique URL and ID for this record. I can see who created it and a full history of all its edits. This record is a living, breathing, evolving entity. Let's customize. Let's add some new columns. Maybe I'll create a new pick list column to track my ratings for each of these purchases, or I'll make a formula to calculate my tax savings. I can even create relationships between records. This $400 lens that I bought is related to the $800 camera I bought. I can customize this all day without writing a single line of code. All right, that's great. But let's get back to what's important. How do I hide these purchases from my wife? Remember how I didn't want my wife to see any prices? Well, in Salesforce, I can simply hide the price column just from her profile. And remember how I didn't want my wife to see my $220 lamp? I can set criteria to only show inexpensive records to my wife.
So this is incredible as well. If you take a look, like you could go into the settings for it. And for example, what he's doing here, I mean, it's super customizable, right? Like he's setting, he put a label on it, show cheap items, and description, it only allows wife to see items of under $200. And then a little bit further down here, the criteria, if it equals expensive, then no, don't show it to David's wife. And then he's created a role specifically for his wife called David's wife. And based off of that, he's created this like automatic thing that would prevent his wife as one of the users on the Salesforce dashboard to automatically not be able to see expensive items, right? And again, like your mind probably starts wandering off into the various many use cases of creating various different roles, being able to see certain items, having permissions to be able to edit certain boxes and all that type of stuff, being able to add, to going back to the car manufacturer example, like being able to add certain data into all the various different products that has been purchased, being able to connect them. That was another thing that we just saw, right? Like being able to connect the camera to the lamp, right? And saying like this was grouped together as a purchase on this day, or together for this purpose of this video, or whatever the case is, right? Like it starts to, you know, kind of fall into place here. Anyways, we'll keep going.
And how about that email I wanted to automatically send to my wife whenever I made a purchase? Well, Salesforce has a drag and drop tool that lets you automate anything you can dream of in a flowchart without writing a single line of code. Sending an email using this tool is a piece of cake. It's scale. Let's talk scale. I can have 20 records in Salesforce or 10 million. It's going to run just as fast either way. I can even open up my Salesforce to millions of people without writing a single line of code. In fact, you, one of my loyal 89 subscribers, can check out my Salesforce yourself by clicking on the link in the description below. This is some really powerful stuff, but we've just scratched the surface of Salesforce's power. Do you know why it's called Salesforce? Well, Salesforce took the core product and pre-built a bunch of functionality that every sales team needs. Unlike a spreadsheet, which is just a blank canvas, sales features like account management, sales forecasting, and email integration are included right out of the box in Salesforce. Any sales team can start using Salesforce today, right away. Heck, nowadays, it's hard to find a sales team that doesn't use Salesforce. It's by far the #1 sales tool today. I don't even know who's in second place. Oh, did I mention Salesforce also did the same thing to the customer service industry? Email ticketing, phone support, live chat. you can run your entire support group on Salesforce right out of the box. And again, Salesforce is the most widely used tool in the world for customer service team.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep pausing every 2 minutes here, but I mean the amount of incredible stuff going on here is just unmatched, right? So originally it was purely the Salesforce side of things of dealing with all that type of stuff and storing customer data and that type of stuff. But then customer service has over the past 2 decades become increasingly important for enterprises around the world, right? And you could literally see all, like, for example, case number, whatever, and the case owner. So this is a person on the, what is it called? Like the customer service agent would be named here. Status of it. Is this still an issue that one of our customers is dealing with? Or is this something that is still an issue? Like maybe, they can't change their password or they can't log into their account or whatever the case is. Like think of Amazon or something, right? Like if you call into the customer service to talk about something, what level of priority is this? Like, is this just like a random Amazon customer, or is this one of our big clients on the AWS side of things? They're paying us $50 million a year. Like we should probably address that a little bit more quickly, right? That type of stuff. And you could leave a little description here, leave a little subject as to maybe what the issue was that customer was facing, all that type of stuff. And you could even click into it a little bit more and see a lot more details as to who is involved in all this type of stuff. So case owner, this would be, again, the customer service agent, or the contact name, the person that actually like called in facing an issue, right? What their phone number is, their email. You would then store the account name. So again, like going back to the car manufacturer example, imagine like you're dealing with like a trucking company that is moving your cars from your factory to the dealership, right? So maybe the logistics company would call in and there's a certain issue that they need resolved. And based off that, you're able to input all this various different information into the Salesforce console. And then from there, not only can you see it, but because it's on the web, and this was a counter positioning they were able to experience maybe 20 years ago, but because it's on the web, not only can you see this, but literally everyone in your company that is like, of course, that has the permissions for it, that is able to see this type of details, but anyone in your company is able to pull this up on any device with an internet access anywhere in the world. Again, why? Because it's on the cloud, right? And it's just a truly brilliant software, right? And I'm seeing on the right over here as well, you could add certain attachments. So I guess that would be worthy as well, depending on the type of industry or the type of case that is involved here, right? Anyways, we'll go back to the video.
Anytime you call a company for help, there's a high chance your call is powered by Salesforce. Now all of a sudden, your sales and support teams are running on the Salesforce platform. So your sales team knows when your customers are having issues, and your support team knows when your customers are looking to buy something. All the data is integrated so you can have a complete view of all interactions between your company and your customers. But wait, there's more. Salesforce has also taken over the marketing industry. Your marketing teams can now use Salesforce out of the box to plan your events and your email campaigns. And since you're already using Salesforce for sales and support, how could you turn down using Salesforce for marketing? Having all that customer data in one place is just too good. Now your marketing teams can actually prove that their campaigns generated sales revenue, or the more likely scenario that they actually contribute nothing to the company and they should all be axed. All right, so we've established that Salesforce is the most dominant tool in the world right now for sales, service, and marketing. And the combination of these three tools working together is absolutely overpowered. But we're still just scratching the surface of the power of Salesforce. How about Salesforce's reporting and dashboard tools? Build any dashboard you can dream of using a drag and drop builder. Your reports automatically respect the security rules you've set up. No code required. And what if you want to code? What if you want to customize something so deeply that the drag and drop flowchart automation tool just won't cut it? Well, Salesforce itself has no less than 4 proprietary programming languages built only for Salesforce. You have Apex, the backend code that's based on Java. Sockwell, Salesforce's version of SQL, Visualforce, and Lightning, the front-end UI frameworks. Oh, you want to integrate with Salesforce? Well, there are at least 10 APIs you can use. More APIs than you would ever want, honestly. Let's keep going. Did you know that Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce, came up with the concept of an app store and gave it to Steve Jobs at Apple? True story. And Salesforce itself has an app store with over 5,000 apps for any use case you can think of. Every Salesforce org I've ever worked in has at least 10 apps installed. And somehow...
Okay, this is just absolutely brilliant as well. So Mark Benioff, which that's him on screen now, he looks much different. He has a beard and all that type of stuff. But Mark Benioff gifted the name App Store to Steve Jobs himself. And the story behind that is truly remarkable. Maybe I'll pull it up later in the video as well. Probably not. But it's like there was a very tight-knit relationship between Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce, and Steve Jobs back when he was alive. And I've made the comparison of Salesforce is somewhat similar to the iPhone in the sense that like you initially buy the iPhone and then over time you get more and more into the ecosystem, and then odds are after 10 years you're not going to switch off of Apple products, and the next time you're looking for a laptop, the next time you're looking for headphones, the next time you're looking for any type of electronic device, odds are you're going to favor buying another Apple product because it just works well with all the other Apple products that you already have, as opposed to going over and buying the Samsung Galaxy Buds or the Samsung Watch or all that type of stuff. So I've made the comparison between Salesforce and Apple, and I think it's a totally fair comparison. Literally, I mean, he gifted the name App Store to Steve Jobs, right? So that is also like another thing that kind of adds to the moat, is the fact that for 2 decades now, all these various different companies have put their apps, and like for example DocuSign for like document signing, they like have their little app over on the Salesforce App Store, and the very many other thousands of apps that are included on the Salesforce App Store, right? So it's like as a enterprise business, when you're looking at the various different CRM systems that you want to possibly incorporate into your business, odds are you're going to choose and favor Salesforce because you have that reliability in the sense that like it's extremely customizable, and then later on if you want to add anything you could just add it via the very comprehensive app store, right? Anyways, we're wrapping up to the end of the video here.
Even with such a big product already, Salesforce still keeps up with the trends. In 2010, Salesforce launched Chatter, its fully integrated social product. In 2013, Salesforce launched Salesforce One, their mobile app that automatically converts every feature of the product to mobile. And in 2016, Salesforce launched Einstein, its artificial intelligence tool to power and predict your data for you. And all these features run on Salesforce in the cloud. 3 times a year, Salesforce automatically installs new versions and security updates so you don't have to. No more ignoring security updates and potentially ending the world. And that's the power of Salesforce. It can save the world. So the downside of Salesforce is it's quite expensive. It's subscription based, and it's about $1,000 a user per year. And you'll need 1 user for each salesperson, support agent, marketer, and whatever other team you've brought on board. For a relatively small company of only 100 users, that's $100,000 each year in license costs alone. So let's say you're running a business and your friendly Salesforce account rep gives you a call tomorrow and says, Merry Christmas, they're doubling your license cost. And next Christmas, they're going to triple it. Realistically, you have no option other than to keep paying Salesforce. All your teams have been happily using Salesforce together. Your internal Salesforce development team has been customizing Salesforce for years, often with proprietary Salesforce-only programming languages. You've installed 10 different Salesforce apps, which only exist in the Salesforce ecosystem, and you've integrated all your internal tools with Salesforce using Salesforce-only API. Oh yeah, did I mention Salesforce has no real competitors? I've been doing nothing but Salesforce for the past 10 years, and I still don't know who's in second place. Even if I did, you can't just download Salesforce and install it on some competitor. You have to start over from scratch, and you can't afford to do that. So you're going to gladly bust out your wallet and continue paying Salesforce millions of dollars. I'm legitimately shocked that Salesforce doesn't aggressively increase their prices each year. But I hope they never hear that from me. So there you have it. That's Salesforce, and it's the best thing since sliced bread. Had I bought Salesforce stock when I first joined this industry?
So lots of different things happen right there, but I mean, I think you guys kind of get the idea. This is a extremely mission critical software. It must exist. Like these are important to the day-to-day operations of any big business, right? We're not talking the local mom and pop restaurant. Like they don't need to manage customer balances and information. I'm talking like your big companies, like your Boeings, your Teslas, your Ford, like these big businesses that have relationships with other big businesses. Like imagine like a logistics company, right? Like they're constantly, you have to maintain, like Canadian Pacific, constantly maintain the balance of all these different companies that like you're moving the coal for them or you're moving the wheat for them, and make sure, you know, the right amount, what's the tonnage of that we moved, in what load, in what train did it leave, like all these different details about your customer accounts. They need to be stored somewhere and it needs to be organized, and Salesforce is the best at doing that. And the last 2 minutes of this video, every time I even have like the slightest quiver of doubt in my mind that maybe I might be wrong on this thesis, I come back to the last 2 minutes of this video where he's talking about, oh, I don't even know who's in second place. I'm legitimately shocked that they don't aggressively increase prices. If it's on Christmas Day and they're like, Salesforce just doubled, you're going to cough up that amount of money to Salesforce. You're going to continue to pay them. It's legitimately that powerful, that mission critical to all these different businesses, and there's nothing they could do to possibly try to switch off of it because it's extremely customized to their specific needs. And then add on the fact that to actually, in theory, if you wanted to even move all that customer data, it would be more costly to move the customer data than it is to cough up the slight price increase that might happen in the future. Not to mention all the time lost in your employees who might not even be that technologically smart, they're going to have to relearn the new software. And oftentimes it's probably going to be a even more inferior software. So you're maybe going to get a cheaper software. In doing so, you're going to have to pay millions and millions, probably tens of millions, depending on how big the company is, in actually moving all your customer data. In that process, there might be data that can't be switched over or needs to be transformed in some type of way, or you might actually, it might not fill correctly. Like it might not, when you're moving that much data, you're moving petabytes and petabytes of data, like you might just lose some stuff in the middle there, right? Like imagine how catastrophic that would be. You have all this customer history for the past however long that's stored in Salesforce. Like think of a bank actually. That's probably another great example of like where Salesforce would be used. All that customer data of they did this at this time, this much money left their account, this much money entered their account, all the transaction history, like they have all this data stored somewhere, right? Like it needs to be stored somewhere. And that's exactly what Salesforce does best, right? And it's all automated after you set it up correctly and whatnot. Super customizable. Again, I've mentioned that a bunch of times, but like even like the marketing emails, right? And at some point, even though like 4 years ago, Salesforce didn't really dabble into this too much, but now increasingly the most important part of Salesforce is their analytics segment, right? So after you've got the Service Cloud for customer service, after you've gotten the Sales Cloud for, it's like the main part of Salesforce that we just went over, right? After you've gotten that, after you've set up all your marketing stuff, now they're going to start selling you analytics on it to, for example, if you're one of the banks and, you just signed up for a new credit card, after 6 months, send them a promotional offer regarding this item. That's all powered by Salesforce. That's all analytics within Salesforce saying, oh, the demographic of 18 to 25 male, that when they spend this amount in this frequency, whatever, analytics, let's send them a promotional offer to sign up for our high yield savings account. And we estimate that 80% of people will sign up, which will make it that much more difficult for that person to switch from our bank to a competitor in the future, which means the lifetime value of this customer for us, the bank, is going to increase if they sign up for another checking account or another savings account. So using Salesforce Analytics, that's 100% worthwhile investment to pay Salesforce a little bit, even if we're able to get X amount of people to sign up for an additional checking account, right? So again, hopefully I've given you a pretty decent overview of the core software that is Salesforce and all the various different capabilities of it, and why, more specifically, why it needs to exist. Like businesses have customers, so they need Salesforce to store the data on their customers. That's the grandiose takeaway from this entire video. With that in mind, Arya, you know what? Great. Salesforce seems like an incredible business, but how dominant of a company is it? I mean, sure, it seems like this category as a whole is incredibly important to to enterprise businesses and whatnot. But Salesforce specifically, how do they really fit into it? Now, this chart here is from the first half of 2020, and you can see that at the time, based off of revenues, they had roughly a 20% market share in CRM applications. And this data isn't from Salesforce themselves. This data is from, I believe, IDC or something like that. IDC, yeah, whatever. Anyways, it's like third-party data, right? So there's not really too much bias going on with this. And this is kind of the visualized way to look at it. And as you can see over time since 2016, which that's the end of this chart over here, Salesforce's market share over time by revenues has continuously gone up. Meanwhile, other competitors, particularly the Oracle and Oracle and SAP are like the legacy competitors to this CRM category, which, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. That's the type of software that Salesforce actually sells. I'm sure most of you probably knew that. But as you can see, Oracle and SAP were the legacy competitors in this industry from maybe like 40, 50 years ago. And actually, Mark Benioff, the founder and current CEO of Salesforce, he actually used to work at Oracle, and he was like the number 3 or number 4 guy at Oracle under Larry Ellison for, I think, 10, 15 years, give or take. And so in the boom of the internet, he actually left Oracle to start Salesforce, and he kind of like counter-positioned Oracle and has become wildly successful, right? So those two are the legacy competitors. And then you have Microsoft and Adobe. They sell primarily on the cloud, and their versions of it are actually slightly taking market share, but I mean, nowhere near what Salesforce's growth has been. And this right here is a more recent one. I think this from first half of 2023. You can see Salesforce's market share is roughly in the 22% range, give or take. Again, another chart from first half of 2022, roughly in the 22-23% market share range. very quickly before I move on, I just found another chart. This one's from 2014, so it's a decade old. You could see that SAP and Oracle had significantly larger market shares. 12%, that's roughly 2/3 of what Salesforce was at the time. And as you could see, over time, the market share in the legacy players and even Microsoft has actually continuously went down, or in the case of Microsoft, stagnated. It's still at 6%. Meanwhile, with Salesforce, it's ballooned up and arguably, actually in dollar terms, taken a lot more market share than these other ones, right? And so the reason why this kind of really matters is the fact that, at least in the businesses that I like to invest in, I primarily look for what's called scale economies, because I hold the belief that the biggest scale player in a scale economies driven business is going to be the long-term winner of that industry. If you are the biggest company in a certain industry with the most access to resources and the most access to talent and money, and you're just the target for, if someone's thinking about potentially getting a customer relationship management software installed at their work or at their business, and you're the default choice of that industry because you're the biggest and the standard of the industry, you become the default choice, and that kind of creates like a flywheel of continuously feeding the biggest scale player. And so that is what I personally look for in most of these businesses. Like, for example, if you think of like Google has become the standard of search, and that has continuously fed this flywheel of every time anyone wants to access the internet, just Google it, right? Like, it's become kind of verbiage as well on top of that, but it's become the standard of accessing the internet. Similar things happen with Salesforce, where they actually look for, like, if you look on certain job resumes, they look for Salesforce experience. That's like saying it's favored that you were proficient in Excel, right? So again, as you can see, the category on its own, it has a lot of counter positioning against both the legacy players, and a step further than that, it's a lot more comprehensive than the alternate, which is like Excel, right? Like Microsoft Excel being a very elementary version of what Salesforce actually is. And so with that, we've covered what Salesforce is, and more specifically, the market share of it, and how the fact that it's the leader in this space. But more importantly, the thing that we haven't really talked too much about is the moat of this business. What is the competitive advantage that Salesforce has over other competitors that are maybe potentially coming up? Arya, in theory, can't Salesforce just get Salesforced themselves by a new company coming up, right? Like the same thing that they did to Oracle and SAP. And what's important to note about that, the Oracle SAP side of thing, it was a once in a lifetime internet boom of, oh my God, everyone's going to the cloud. And so Salesforce being cloud only and starting out on the cloud, offering a software as a service model, being able to do that was what really catapulted it into the state which it is in today. Now, some can argue that maybe AI and whatnot, Palantir is going to come disrupt it, whatever the case is. Actually, Palantir like mostly competes on the analytics side of the things, which again, it's the fastest growing segment in Salesforce, but it's only like 10% of revenue. So I'm not too worried about that. In analytics, in my opinion, it seems to be like a very saturated industry, because it's everyone seems to be kind of trying to sell analytics and this and that and whatever. Like, you see it as like a segment, and super random businesses. But anyways, that's a topic for another video. Going back to Salesforce though, the moat of this business is it really ultimately comes down to the high switching costs. Now, I wrote a thread on this. I'll link it in the description if you want to go through the whole thing. And this is kind of what ultimately inspired the video. But this item number here, number 3, this is probably the most important thing. Like the biggest takeaway you're going to have about Salesforce is this, which I kind of hinted at earlier in the video. Bear with me here because we're going to read a little bit. But long story short, it is ultimately the ecosystem moat that Apple has, except like literally times 1,000, right? So this is what I wrote in my friend Dividend Dude. This is what I wrote in his Discord to one of the members there. And I said, I chose an iPhone 10 years ago and have been buying iPhones and Apple products as a result for a decade straight. I got cross-sold to the Mac, iPad, Pencil, AirPods, the watch, and countless chargers and the services. So sure, when I have the iPhone, maybe I could switch, right? Like I could go to a Samsung or whatever the case is, like my next phone. I'm not too stuck on that. It's a hassle to learn the Android user interface, but it's doable. But then I have my photos on iCloud. Well, then I'd have to buy like a third-party software that's probably like $10 or something to transfer my phones into like an external hard drive. And, you know, Apple's weird about that. And they really do make it difficult to switch your photos off of iCloud. And then take into consideration the fact that iMessage and FaceTime and all these different things that, you know, I'm linked with my friends and I'm linked with my family and all that type of stuff. And then, I have my music downloaded onto iTunes, so I can't really switch that either. I mean, it's kind of hard stuck on my thing. Like when I switch to an Android, I would have to switch to Spotify as well. My music isn't going to transfer over. And then what about the watch? I just bought a watch, right? I guess that's useless because it only works with iPhones, and getting an Android would make it useless. The exact same thing applies to Salesforce, except on a 1,000 times scale. Why? If you bought an iPhone 10 years ago and have continued buying Apple products for 10 years straight, imagine what 500 employees at an insurance company are doing. Every single day, building, developing, getting used to the user interface, adding in customer data, integrating the software with other plugins and whatnot every single day. Hundreds of thousands of data points all integrated into Salesforce. Oh, and CRM has an app store too. In fact, Benioff gifted it to Steve Jobs, right? And sure, maybe you're able to move your petabytes of data by some miracle and incur millions of dollars of fees in the process. But what about the custom software add-ons you paid for that you likely paid a premium on? Or wait, don't forget, you got a discount on Slack. They actually own Slack as well for your teams because it's their favorite messaging app that they absolutely love. And Slack offered you a discount because you're already a Salesforce customer. Oh, and did I mention the UI change after a decade? Don't forget, just like the iPhone, the UI of Salesforce has trained you to know that XYZ tab is located in XYZ location. So when you switch over to a competitor like Oracle or some other software, the countless hours that your staff has to spend retraining and relearning all that type of stuff, it just wouldn't make sense at that point, right? So again, there's like monetary costs of it, which is like you moving the data. And then there's also the non-monetary costs of your staff. That might be like a 50, 60-year-old employee. Like he is not going to relearn the new user interface. It might even take him like over a year to learn all the various different use cases and the tiny buttons and the tabs in the corner. Like it becomes too complicated. Too complicated for me, let alone someone triple my age. You know what I mean? Like, so it becomes progressively difficult to switch off of Salesforce. And so to kind of wrap up the ending of this video, I want to go over the fundamentals, do like a pretty brief overview of really what I believe are like the most important things for Salesforce, right? Like we've pretty much established this is a wonderful wide moat business that you're never going to switch off of. There's scale economies, there's network effects, because the more people that get onto Salesforce, the more people are going to get used to the user interface and used to it for enterprises and whatnot, and to the point where it's now asked if you're in job interviews and job resumes, people include that they have Salesforce experience. Like that, those are network effects. You know what I mean? So with Salesforce, this is all the various revenue streams they have. So you might notice I believe the red, the green, and the purple here. This is, the red, the green, and the orange here. This is your marketing, sales, and service cloud, right? Like the big three that was highlighted in the video we watched. The purple right here is platform and other revenue. I believe this has to do with like the analytics and all that type of stuff. And additionally, I think maybe Slack would be included in that. And then the blue right here, which is the smallest amount, this is actually the only business line that is actually in the negative. It's declining year over year. This part of the business is like setup fees and that type of stuff, right? And I tweeted about this earlier, and I understand it looks very jumbled here, but to kind of get an idea, the service revenue, the sales revenue, and the marketing, those three are kind of in the middle there. Like they're growing at roughly around 10%, give or take. And then the key highlight is the analytics side of the business that is growing incredibly fast. But again, reminder, this is a very small portion of revenues. And then the professional services, which is the smallest portion of revenues, that is in just decline, right? Sorry, I think I didn't have the analytics even toggled on here. So as you can see, the analytics is in orange here, and this is a pretty small part of the business right now, but it's going to progressively become bigger and bigger because it is growing above a 20% on the revenue side of things. In terms of the margins and the balance sheet and whatnot, no surprises, this business has incredibly high margins, and they're actually increasing over time, particularly on the operating margin side of things, sitting at just shy of 80% gross margins, just shy of 20% operating margins. This is most likely going to improve over time. I mean, to give you an idea, Microsoft has 45% operating margins, and I think just off the top of my head, I think Oracle's in like the 30-35% range. So in the very long term, as this business continues to mature, I do expect operating margins to get closer and closer to 30-35%. I think that's feasible for an enterprise software business, right? And the big thesis with Salesforce, the reason why I personally bought, is because two things happened at the same time. Firstly, Salesforce, for the longest time, as you could see, they've been issuing a ton of stock-based compensation relative to the amount of free cash flow that they produce. It's roughly stayed at about half of the free cash flow has always been stock-based compensation. But in the recent about 6 quarters or so, you would notice the fall off of stock-based compensation. It actually declined year over year between, they actually had one fiscal year. So this is full year 2023. This is 2022. Bear with me here, right? So you would notice between 2022 and 2024, stock-based comp actually declined year over year, and free cash flow, it almost looks like a glitch. I mean, it ballooned up. Like you could see like a pretty organic trend line going up, and then it just, right? Like, anyways, the reason why I personally bought into Salesforce is the joining of these two items, where it's the stock-based compensation declining and the company is becoming leaner over time and more diligent on their cost cutting. And then at the same time, the free cash flows are just absolutely booming because of said cost cutting, right? So these two items together brings us to a world where Salesforce is currently producing about $8 billion of free cash flow minus the stock-based compensation, right? And if we take a look, currently they trade at an enterprise value of roughly 250 billion. Let's just do some very brief, quick maths. That means that right now you could go out and buy as many shares of Salesforce as you possibly want for about a 31 times price of free cash flow. To give you an idea, the S&P 500 trades at about a 30 times price of free cash flow. So you got two options today, right? You could go out and buy the S&P 500 at 30 times free cash flow, give or take, stock-based comp adjusted, and you'll experience maybe between a 9 to 11% free cash flow growth rate out into the next 5 years, call it. With Salesforce, on the other hand, historically, free cash flows have grown above a 20% clip. If we go down here and we look at the free cash flow growth rate in particular, it's grown at roughly 34% since 2015. Now, this isn't going to continue for the next couple of years. Instead, by simply dragging this, we could see what the analysts are expecting for the next couple of years. And I'm going to just zoom this in into the, let's just say the 2024. And you can see the consensus analyst estimate is for free cash flows to grow at roughly a 16% for the next coming years, right? Now, of course, we should always take analyst expectations with a grain of salt, but I've highlighted this method before in, I think one of the videos on buying at all-time highs. I think that's the one. I'll link it in the corner or whatever. But a way to see, like, is taking analyst estimates as like, is it like a reasonable thing to do, is to simply look at the lowest, most bearish analyst and the most optimistic analyst and computing the difference between those two. And for Salesforce in particular, you could see like there's roughly a couple percent disagreement on this. So, and Salesforce is an incredibly consistent company. I mean, in the most recent quarter, this was the first time ever that they missed on revenue estimates, or revenue guidance that they issued themselves. And this is it's a SaaS business, right? Like it's a software business. It's reoccurring revenues and free cash flow. This is an extremely predictable business. I would argue that the actual free cash flow growth rate over the next couple of years would actually probably come in line pretty close, unless there's like a massive step change and like they acquire a company that artificially boosts that free cash flow growth rate. I think it would probably be relatively close to what the analyst expectation is. And me personally, based off my own models that I've done, I expect, based off the margin expansion that I foresee for this business, I actually think it's a little bit even more than that. I would probably estimate closer to like 18, 19% for the next 3 years, give or take. So again, going back to it, you could either buy Salesforce today at 30 times cash flow or the S&P 500 at 30 times cash flow. Now, what you have to ask yourself is the combined entity that is the S&P 500, does it have that much wider of a moat to justify half the growth rate, give or take, of Salesforce? Does it have incredibly better margins than Salesforce? Clearly not. Salesforce is a software business with 80% gross margins. So on the moat side of things, does the combined entity of the S&P 500 with all the various different REITs and the zero moat retailers and apparel brands and all the industrials that have been in decline for the past 2 decades, everything combined, is that a better combined entity, a better business than what it is that you could buy with Salesforce? And again, me personally, I would err on the side of Salesforce. As I've done, this is 32% of my portfolio. I've been buying heavily into this business, and I've been buying at lower prices, actually. I was buying when the valuation of Salesforce on a cash flow basis was below what the valuation of the S&P 500 was. A truly remarkable mispricing in the markets. And at that point, people were calling it a fake AI story. They were saying that it's over for Salesforce. Palantir and all these other garbage companies, actually like Palantir, but all these other AI companies, quote unquote, are going to come in and disrupt Salesforce. Software is dead, this and that. Go on the day of Salesforce's earnings, if there's some way to do this. On the day of Salesforce's earnings last quarter, people were saying that software is dead. That was the sentiment around this wonderful business. Me personally, I bought at $2.15 a share. Right? Like, anyways, and then before we jump to the valuation spreadsheet, I just want to get a couple things out the way because these are common complaints with Salesforce. One thing in particular has been the very dilutive heavy nature of Salesforce in the past. If you look in the past, give or take year, once they started becoming efficient, sure, they've had a very heavily dilutive past. But if you look since 2022, which is actually 2021 in actuality, until now, they've continuously bought back shares. And this looks much better if we chuck on the trailing over here. And you can see that since whatever this quarter is, the July quarter of 21, or all the way to the July 22, you could see that they've continuously bought back a little bit of shares. This isn't anything meaningful. And another thing that we could chuck up here on FinChat is the shareholder yield right here. And this is like the combined dividend plus the debt pay downs plus the buybacks that this business does. And you could see that in the past, again, since like September onwards over here, or I guess I should say since August of 22, right? Since this quarter, roughly about 2 years ago, they've continuously started returning capital back to shareholders. Like net everything, they are actually returning capital back to you via the buybacks, the debt pay downs, and the dividends. They're returning roughly 3% back to you, the shareholder, right? So again, another misconception with Salesforce, people haven't looked at it in a while and they think, oh, it has a lot of stock-based compensation. No, you know what? Actually, it's only about 25. It's actually less than Google, right? Like Google does about 35% stock-based comp compared to free cash flows. Salesforce now trailing does about 25%, right? So the stock-based comp isn't an issue anymore. It's pretty average for enterprise software businesses and mature software businesses at that. Oh, but they dilute shares. You know what? Actually, they don't. They are buying back more than they are diluting. Another common critique that I get with Salesforce is, Arya, but sure, cash flow, whatever. But Arya, I like to look at the PE ratio. Look at the PE ratio, it's 47. And to kind of combat that, I guess the forward PE is 26, like big deal. But more importantly, you shouldn't even be using the PE to begin with. One, Salesforce, just like many other big tech companies, they run almost like a venture capital fund within their business where they're investing in a bunch of startups and all that type of stuff. And that really muddies up the anything below the operating line on the income statement. So I wouldn't be using it for that. Like if one of their investments goes down in any quarter, they have to, at the ending date of that quarter, they have to take whatever that investment into like Anthropic or something is worth, and they have to record that on the income statement as a loss or a gain. That doesn't really speak to Salesforce, the business itself. That's why we always use cash flows, right? And another thing, we use cash flows because Salesforce is a software business. You're paying for services to be provided later, right? I pay for Salesforce today to use it for the next month. So when you look at, and particularly on like annual plans and like these big companies, they might pay for the coming year. And obviously, like we haven't actually provided that service to that person yet, right? So you can't record that by accounting laws. I did a full video on this, by the way. By accounting laws, you can't record that revenue that you just collected for the upcoming year. You can't record that as revenue within this quarter. You have to record per quarter as you provide the service, quote unquote. But on cash flow accounting, they only look at what you received, like the money that, oh, you received this money for the coming year or the coming 2 years or whatever the case is. This is the money that is in your bank account that you can now go reinvest back into the business. Oh, that's wonderful. We could record that as free cash flow. And that's exactly what Salesforce does. That's exactly what all the software businesses do. You're paying today for services to be provided later. So again, that's why we use cash flows as well. And to kind of finish the video at the end here, this is the valuation spreadsheet that I like to include in my videos. Long story short, we are taking the current valuation of the business and we're dividing it by how fast we expect the company to grow at. As I mentioned earlier, analysts expect roughly 16% free cash flow growth rate. I'm saying there's like a 1.5% buyback on that, right? So again, very conservative. In reality, probably going to grow even faster than that. And with that in mind, Salesforce currently trades at roughly a 1.7 times what I like to call free cash flow to growth multiple. To give you an idea, earlier we were comparing it to the S&P 500. S&P 500 trades well above a 3 times free cash flow to growth multiple. Again, spitballing here, to kind of give you an idea on what some of the other businesses here look like. Microsoft trades at roughly a 2.85 times free cash flow to growth multiple. Visa, just under 2. You have SCHG, which is the growth ETF that I like to invest in. That one is trading at 2.3 times. Again, and all the way at the bottom here, actually, Costco. Costco trades just shy of a 7 times free cash flow to growth multiple. Above here, I have a more comprehensive list of names. And the worst, I guess you could say, offender of this spreadsheet that I've put together is Tesla. Tesla trades at a 16 times free cash flow to growth multiple here. But again, as you can see, depending on the inputs you put in, especially with the growth rate side of things could definitely be variable, to say the least. I mean, again, depends on the free cash flow assumptions that you're putting in, and particularly the growth rate that you're assuming with this. And at that, hopefully I've given you a very comprehensive view into what Salesforce is, why it's a great company, what the moat is and all that type of stuff, and more importantly, why it actually trades at a very reasonable valuation even today, after the stock has ran up, I don't know, 20-ish% since the low from last quarter. I think it's a great buy. I mean, me personally, I was buying at these prices, even at higher prices, the past 4 or 5-ish months, but it sits at like 32% of my portfolio. That's why I stopped buying. I do believe in a little bit of concentration risk. I know I've been on air previously saying that I don't believe in concentration risk at all. I've since slightly changed my opinion on that. I think beyond like 25%, you start running into a little bit more of like, you're at the risk of massive underperformance for a very long time if that one stock doesn't turn out that well. You know what I mean? Even though I'm very confident in the business, I think I've demonstrated that throughout the entirety of this video. And if you learned something in this video and you like the fact that I tried to not waste your time throughout the entirety of the video, I just ask you to do one thing. It costs you absolutely nothing. It takes you maybe about a minute to sign up. I'm affiliated with FinChat, which is this website that we were looking at earlier. It's the top link in the description. Again, costs you absolutely nothing. There is no hidden fees. You don't have to, you're not obligated to pay a certain amount, none of that. I want you to go using the link in the description. You get 2 weeks of FinChat Pro completely for free. That's what you're looking at throughout the entirety of this video. You get like 20 years of financial data, all that type of stuff, access to analyst estimates, and just a whole lot of other things that we didn't even cover. I mean, there's a bunch of tabs on the right here. There's a ChatGPT feature. Like you could ask over here, I asked like, has CP's management mentioned anything about extra capex? It goes through the earnings call, figures all that type of information out. And you could do this on literally any company. There's international companies. The KPIs thing that we were looking at earlier in the video, right? Like being able to segment all this revenue information and all that type of stuff and have like a stack view of how it looks like. And then if you wanted to, you could click show percentage change. And all of a sudden, again, very messy, but you could see the percentage change and the growth of all these different segments. And let's just say you want to look at everything minus, for example, the professional services, you could do that, right? Like there's a lot of use cases. It's a very powerful tool. And again, it's completely free using the link in the description. I just want you to try it. That's it. Sign up for an account using a Google account, using your Google email or whatever the case is, and give it a try for the next 2 weeks. That's all I ask for. And of course, if you wanted to subscribe, I'm going to continue to post high quality videos just like this one. And you could always go back on that decision if you end up not liking the videos, but I highly doubt that. Thank you for watching and have a great day.